Welcome to Marsupial World, the unambiguous podcast.
I'm Christian Harding. Each episode, we delve into the uneasy space where Australia's native animals meet government policy, land management, and the stories we tell to justify both. We talk all about marsupials, from kangaroos to the classified extinct thylacines, and the quiet war playing out across the bush. Not just in science, but in politics, profit, and perception. Today, we begin in South Australia, a place in drought, a government under pressure, and a decision to shoot tens of thousands of kangaroos in the name of compassion. But is this about helping animals, or is it something older and more familiar?
Thanks, Christian. Hi, I'm Tom Jones. To understand where we are now, let's start with what was said 18 months ago. In late 2023, the Stock Journal podcast aired an episode called Roo Restrictions, hosted by Kiara Stacey. In it, Oru farmer and commercial shooter Tom Kushner shared a brutal reality check from the field. Here's what he said. In 2018-2019, I harvested 2,751 kangaroos, and by 2020-2021, that dropped to just 76 due to the number of kangaroos decreasing in his area. Kangaroos are so transient that the idea of farming them made no sense, he also said. It seems to me that the numbers that are getting shot at the moment, there's barely markets for as it is. He also said, so who's going to buy these kangaroos? That's one of the biggest problems. Where even with the volume as it is, there's not a huge market for it. That was before the crisis hit. Since then, large parts of South Australia have faced the worst drought on record. Paddocks are dry, water tanks are empty, and the native wildlife, including kangaroos, are under immense pressure. Instead of scaling back the already failing kangaroo harvest industry, the South Australian government, led by Premier Peter Malinauskas, responded with $73 million of drought assistance. Of that, $3.1 million was allocated specifically for kangaroo and feral pest management. Let's break that down. Within that $3.1 million, $900,000 goes directly to kangaroo management. Shooters will receive $5 per kangaroo that can be commercially harvested. $7 per kangaroo is paid for the animals that cannot be commercially used or are taken under non-commercial destruction permits. An additional $200 per day is paid to field processors, even in areas where harvest numbers have traditionally been below quota. According to the transcript from the South Australian Parliamentary Inquiry into kangaroo and wallaby populations, specifically during the presentation by the Department of Environment and Water, some regions, particularly north of the dog fence, where harvesting is being proposed, are rarely surveyed due to the extremely low kangaroo numbers. In fact, population densities in these areas are just estimated at 0.5 kangaroos per square kilometre. With densities this low, these areas should not be subject to harvesting. The government says this money is about preventing suffering, removing starving kangaroos, and harvesting others before they get to that point. But that's not what's really going on. This isn't about animal welfare. It's about keeping the kangaroo harvest system afloat, even when the numbers don't support it. Quotas are being set based on the inflated population estimates, but the animals aren't there. Harvesters can't meet their targets, not because they're not trying, it's because the land is emptying out. So what's the government doing? They're handing out public money to cover the shortfall, not to stop the suffering, not to protect ecosystems, but to keep an industry running that's no longer viable. We're paying to kill kangaroos to meet harvest quotas. Quotas set based on population surveys that don't match the reality on the ground. The animals simply aren't there in the numbers the government claims, but instead of adjusting the quotas, they're pushing payments to keep harvesters hitting the targets that can't be met naturally. It's not relief, it's not science, it's not even management. It's damage control, disguised as compassion, with kangaroos caught in the middle. If that sounds familiar, it should. Over 100 years ago, the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger, was blamed for livestock losses. The government slapped a bounty on its head, £1 per kill. The result? Complete eradication. We're not saying kangaroos will disappear overnight, But one thing's clear, when the pressure builds, native wildlife always pays the price. Meanwhile, the real ecological wrecking crew, the feral deer, the pigs, the goats, continues unchecked. They trample creeks, they strip the bushland bare, they compete directly with livestock. And then there's the red fox, a silent catastrophe in fur, erasing native species with brutal efficiency. Helicopter culls to control these pests cost tens of thousands of dollars per day, and most carcasses left to rot, feeding the very predators they're meant to suppress. Here's the reality. Instead of flooding the market with kangaroo products no one's asking for, why not address the real problem? Even major global brands, Nike, Adidas, Puma, New Balance, Diodora, Mizuno, Sokita, and now Asics have cut ties with the kangaroo leather on ethical grounds. This isn't just market failure, it's moral failure too, and it exposes the hypocrisy at the heart of Australia's ethical meat narrative. Because there's nothing ethical about killing native animals for products the world is rejecting. The deer, goats and feral pigs are non-native, invasive and already accepted in the international meat markets. They're destructive, they're abundant, and unlike kangaroos, no one's fighting to protect them. Managing them properly could reduce culling costs, slash waste, and build rural and regional jobs without turning Australia's native icons into political scapegoats. And at the centre of it all, the farmer. Caught between bad policy, market collapse, and an environmental crisis that's been decades in the making. If we're serious about sustainability, it's time to stop hunting shadows and start confronting the damage we've allowed to become normal. This isn't drought relief, it's political damage control, dressed as compassion. We're not managing a crisis, we're outsourcing blame. And once again, native animals are taking the fall. We've been here before, a century ago. It was the thylacine, a bounty, a story, a scapegoat. And we all know how that ended. If we've learned anything at all, it should be this. Stop blaming wildlife for the damage we've done. History doesn't have to repeat. But it will, if we let it.
In this first episode of Marsupial World, an unambiguous podcast, we started with a warning from the inside and ended with echoes from the past. When bounties start getting framed as compassion, it's time to pay closer attention. And next we flip the story entirely. In what was originally going to be our first episode, we'll bring you never seen before footage of a thylacine. Not in Tasmania, but here on the mainland. Not just a blurry shape in the scrub, not just a story, a fully blown encounter. Join me and a special guest analyst as we break it down, frame by frame, and ask, what if the animal we wiped out never really left?
This is Marsupial World, the unambiguous podcast. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe.